The Vietnam War has proven time and time again that the effects of war can shake everyone in a country to their core. This war divided the USA's population for years, and arguably there is still a divide to this day. Countless films would be produced about the war, as they would be for any modern conflict, or any conflict for that matter. However, perhaps the most notorious of the films made about the Vietnamese War would be Apocalypse Now. Directed by Francis Ford Coppola, this film would divide critics on where they believed the film stood. Was this film in some way glorifying the war, or was it a 3-hour-long anti-war statement? In this video, I will assert that this film is not only a statement on the madness of war, but also is an anti-war film and is actively trying to show the horrors of war in a way to show people that it is not worth the risk as well as the loss of life. Now, with this in mind, one of the largest obstacles I will have to overcome with this assertion will be a 2009 interview with Coppola for The Guardian, in which he actively states that he doesn't believe that Apocalypse Now is indeed an anti-war film. However, this interview also gives us an insight as to what he defines as anti-war. And the description he gives amounts to a kind of romantic comedy based in a country that a war is going on in. It is easy to see why he chooses this as an anti-war film's description, as it doesn't have any connection to war and is somehow trying to actively play against the idea of the war that is going on. However, for the purposes of this video, we will be using the dictionary definition of anti-war, that being against a specific or any war. With this in mind, Apocalypse Now goes to extreme lengths to show the horrors of the Vietnamese War, and indeed modern war in general. At multiple points, we, the viewer, are subjected to images of people of any and all backgrounds, soldiers, civilians, and guerrillas, injured, dismembered, or being killed. In all of these scenes, it is presented as truly horrific. No matter who dies during this film, how or why, their deaths are never glorious or glorified. They are always presented in a way that leaves the circumstances of their demise morally grey or solidly black. Nguyen Cac Vinh, Vietnamese historian and critic, would highlight how he believes that Apocalypse Now needs more of a Vietnamese perspective and doesn't do enough to explore the side of the guerrillas. Here, I would agree to the extent that the film doesn't explore much of a Vietnamese perspective, but in that aspect, it's not designed to. The film industry at large does indeed need more of a focus on what the people they fought against felt, but this film does something more than give us a perspective of the Vietnamese people. It shows us the horrors that they were subjected to through the eyes of those that were the subjectors. Along this avenue, I'm inclined to agree with Pamela de Mory's assessment that this film is unapologetically cynical in its description of imperial colonialism and the effects of it. Michael Woloski points out that Coppola was indeed opposed to the Vietnamese War, and as such we can assume that he would have never produced a film supporting the war effort. It is this definite condemnation of the American involvement in Vietnam that fuels the entire movie. The main cast are never presented as heroes, and neither are the main characters of the film. A little after the halfway point of the movie, a couple are stopped on their boat to be checked over to ensure that their cargo is in order. These are a completely ordinary couple who proceed to be harassed by the main cast. Then, as Chef goes to open a box and the wife rushes to stop him, they open fire immediately. No hesitation, no real reason. Only for Chef to then discover that she was trying to stop him from opening a box which contained a small puppy that they were transporting. They murder these two innocent people out of a fear they might be trying to supply the Viet Cong. When they realise their mistake, Chef is the most outwardly distressed. However, the woman is still alive. As the rest of them try to save her, the main character walks over, and without so much as a hesitation, he shoots her dead. There is no reaction to this. He does not change his face to show any kind of pity. She was in the way of making it further in his mission, according to what he says. And on the surface level, this is an incredibly disgusting action that his character never recovers from throughout the rest of the movie. Apocalypse Now is littered with memorable characters who, if not looked at deeply, can be labelled as somewhat heroic and having heroic traits. One being General Kilgore. He is a man who is unaffected by combat and does not flinch at the sound of bombs landing near him. He is, however, a disillusioned commanding officer who is absolutely more concerned with surfing and having a good time than he is with human life. The largest combat scene of the movie is initiated simply because he wants to see a champion swimmer that the main character is brought in as a part of his team surf. This combat scene is so key to understanding why this movie is anti-war. As the helicopters come in, they are backed by the music of Flight of the Valkyries. This choice of music is key, because it isn't simply something that is overlaid into the movie to give this scene presence. It is a piece that is specifically chosen by Kilgore because it scares the locals. The history of this song being somewhat rooted in Nazi origin, being composed before the Nazi rise to power, it was presented very much so as a Nazi opera piece as the years went on. Jonathan Carr highlights how this and many other of Wangler's performances were indeed used and presented as being very much so Nazi in how they were meant to be perceived. Regardless of this subcontext, this scene does not do anything to show the Americans as heroic. They take on a group of surprised Viet Cong who only have one means of defending themselves, being a large machine gun, against the onslaught of American attackers. The explosions, of course, are glorious in the sense that they are shown massive and grandiose, but only in the sense that any action movie or a movie that shows war would contain explosions. By the end of the fighting, we are left with Kilgore on the beach, with a few fighters left, to which he calls in a napalm strike across the forest, and as the shooting stops, he has no concern for the others there. He represents the effects of a lost humanity. What the ideal American fighter was someone who was no longer human on an emotional level, someone who had disconnected from human life so heavily that they could look at a man whose bowels were laying out in front of him and simply not react at all. He is also deliberately larger than life to this aspect, in a sense to show that he is a caricature and is indeed not a representation of what all commanding officers were. He is the example to show you what depths truly could be reached. With all of this, what does it culminate in? As much as Coppola may disagree as his own definition differs, the film is placed squarely as an anti-war statement, in the immediate sense that it is squarely against the idea of war and colonialism in the same manner. Apocalypse Now is undoubtedly monumentous. Its story may be a retelling of another, but it keeps its overarching messages of danger of colonialism in the modern world. Marcia Kinder perfectly highlights how Coppola is able to readapt The Heart of Darkness for a unique experience tailored to the Vietnamese War. It takes various aspects of the war and presents them in an unapologetically cynical way, not only of the war itself, but how it was conducted. We see how the cast are constantly drawing conclusions about those above them, about how they have sent out people barely old enough to drive to fight a war that they are nowhere near. They are used to represent the loss of American consciousness towards the outer world, as they are thrown into the horrors of war. This film takes the idea of being anti-war and does more than protest. It actively shows why war is madness, and how the only way to effectively conduct war is to reach into madness and lose yourself. It represents the way in which war changes people for the worse, and how we lose ourselves if we dedicate ourselves to it fully. It shows the effect of armchair generals giving commands to do horrific things from a comfortable distance away, where they will never have to view, see, or experience what they are asking others to do. Apocalypse Now is not just an anti-war film. It is an appeal to the viewer's humanity, to look upon the effects of war and judge its worth, the destruction, physical and mental, to anyone. Not just to their own people, but to the people that they are destroying. While this entire argument can easily be pulled apart by the fact that Coppola, the director-creator of the movie, doesn't view it as anti-war, it is key to understand that it doesn't have to be assumed by the creator to be anti-war for it to be anti-war. He is showing war in a negative view, in a negative light, and is no ways trying to glorify the violence that people are being subjected to. This film is anti-war, and unapologetically so. Thank you for watching, and I hope you have enjoyed. Have a wonderful rest of your day.